Oh, thanks very much, Acting Deputy. Well, I recall November last year being here in the Senate doing my job. And I recall other senators being in here doing our job, talking about housing, talking about tax breaks for billionaires. But you know what? I can't remember if Senator Hanson was here during that. That's right. She was off on some junket with Donald Trump at Mar-a-Lago for a 2-week sitting period, schmoozing with billionaires, no doubt talking about all of Trump's talking points and how wonderful it would be, while the rest of us are actually doing our job. And then One Nation comes in here and starts putting on this kind of motion, saying, oh, inflation is a result of government spending, conveniently forgetting that President Trump, who your leader, Senator Hanson, was schmoozing with on a paid billionaire junket in Mar-a-Lago in November of last year, started a bloody war which has driven inflation through the roof. And I remember One Nation at the start of this war in February coming out and cheering it on, images of Senator Hanson, images of Donald Trump, images of Gina Reinhart. I remember all the images and how you loved the war. It was great, terrific, because it fed into One Nation's racist attack on Muslims and Islamophobia. That's what they did. They were feeding that trope, and they thought they had great images of Senator Hanson not working here in the Senate, like she's paid to by the Australian public, but schmoozing off in Mar-a-Lago with Donald Trump. They had, no doubt, some lovely little images of Senator Hanson and Gina Reinhart. No doubt they were negotiating the gift of the next expensive plane from Gina Reinhart because she got sick. I understand Gina Reinhart doesn't like always travelling with Senator Hanson in her plane. I get that. I wouldn't want to be travelling around the country with Senator Hanson in my plane if I had one. So Gina Reinhart, instead of bringing her along in the plane, buys her a plane. The billionaire class owns One Nation. The billionaire class absolutely owns One Nation. And then you come in here and say the reason Australians can't afford things is because of reckless government spending. Well, maybe it's because of the investor tax breaks that One Nation votes to keep every single time they're on. Maybe it's because there's not enough money to build public housing because you refuse to tax fossil fuel profits. Maybe it's there's not enough money for public housing and to build the houses Australia need because One Nation opposes ever putting any impost on the resource industry. And you know what? Watching One Nation come in here every day and defend Gina Reinhart, defend the minerals industries, get out of jail free cards, defend fossil fuel profits, I've been watching it. Turns out Gina's been watching it too, and she bought you a plane. She bought you a plane. I don't think it's just because she doesn't want to have Senator Hanson in her plane. I think it's because Gina Reinhart, the billionaire class, own One Nation. They absolutely own One Nation. And watching One Nation play this distraction politics, and we've seen it, you know, that's what Senator Hanson was off in Trump's Mar-a-Lago in November last year, learning about distraction politics, learning how you can weaponise migration and weaponise attacks on migration to avoid taking on the 1% and the billionaire class. That's the lesson that Senator Hanson was getting at her CPAC conference with Donald Trump last year, learning how to weaponise migration, make us hate each other, fight amongst each other for tiny little scraps out of the system, while the 1% and the billionaire class absolutely cream it in and steal from us, steal from the public purse, steal from public resources. That's what Senator Hanson was doing for 2 weeks in November of last year, not the job she was paid to do, to come here and be a senator for the public, but she accepted this gift, this billionaire gift, as One Nation always does, because that's who owns One Nation. And when we hear you talk about ordinary Australians, you know, from 10,000 feet above in Gina Reinhart's jet, talking about ordinary Australians and working Australians as though that's who you're fighting for, we see you. We see you in the corporate jets. We see you at Trump's mansion. We see you at these far-right billionaire-funded conferences. And increasingly, the Australian public is going to see you for what you are, because you don't give a rat's about people who can't afford a mortgage. You want to create division and divide Australians against each other, and you're playing Trump's rulebook, and that rulebook is looking increasingly crap.